Morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of All About You. And All About You is a biographical talk show that I broadcast live from Windsor Studios in Windsor, Connecticut every week. And it's a show that's basically been revamped from the 2010s. All About You is a show that's designed to give my guests their life story. And I think this morning we have an amazing guest with a very amazing life story. He has a background in professional sports as a player at senior executive level in the National Basketball Association. And he is the co-founder of the Orlando Magic basketball team, no other than Pat Williams. Good morning, Pat. How are you doing?
Jonathan, very well. Nice to meet up with you today and look forward to our chat.
Okay, it's our pleasure, Pat. Pat, I believe you were born in Philadelphia or the Pennsylvania area?
I was born there, but I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, Jonathan, right a little bit south of Philadelphia. So that's where I spent my years up until 18 when I headed off to college. Wilmington, right up there in the northern part of Delaware, probably the best kept secret in the country. Beautiful area, 30, 40 minutes from Philadelphia, an hour, 15, 20 to Baltimore, close to the ocean, up into the mountains. Just a terrific place to grow up.
So, which team were you rooting for growing up in Delaware?
Well, when I was there, the A's were still in Philadelphia and the Phillies, of course. And I became a baseball nut at the age of 7. I saw my first Major League Baseball game in June of 1947. And I fell in love with baseball, the sights and the sound and the smell and the color of baseball. And so there was a game every weekend because the A's or the Phillies were home. My mother was a baseball fan, and she would drive me up to the ballpark, up to Shibe Park in Philadelphia, 21st and Lehigh, every weekend from the time of age 4, 7, and 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, we lived in Shibe Park, and I just was enamored with baseball. I was a baseball card collector, wanted to play baseball, and now I had great interest in the other sports as well. I was a football fan, a basketball fan, but baseball was the driving force in my life as a youngster.
And I believe, Pat, at that time, baseball was the number one sport in America, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, we're back in the 1940s now, and the early 1950s, and yes, the NFL was still feeling its way. It had not gotten anywhere near the prominence as it is today. So yes, baseball was the dominant sport. And living near Philadelphia, there were 2 teams in town: the Philadelphia Athletics, the Philadelphia Phillies. And as a baseball kid, baseball nut, and my mother loved it. Up to the ballpark every weekend we would go, and became absolutely enamored with the A's and the Phillies. I was a baseball kid through and through.
Now, what position did you play baseball when you started playing, like in high school?
Well, I was a catcher from the beginning. I loved going behind the plate. My dad gave me a catcher's mitt when I was very young, and that's the position that I found where I fit. I caught through high school, and then was fortunate enough to get a baseball scholarship to go to Wake Forest University and played ball there for 4 years. And then in 1962, upon graduation, I was very blessed as I look back. I got an opportunity to play pro ball for two years in the Phillies system, and that laid the foundation really for everything I've done since.
Now, Pat, how was it like when you was playing for the Major League Baseball team back in the 60s?
Well, we were in Miami. Miami was a farm club with the Phillies then, and the Florida State League. So we bussed up and down the state of Florida all for 2 summers that I was there playing. And I got a good taste of what it's like to be a professional athlete. I got a good taste of the ups and the downs of the profession. I really got a good feel for life pro athlete. And and as I said, for to have that very, very early in my career, it laid the foundation for everything that's happened since. I have a much better sense and feel of what it's like to be a pro athlete and what athletes go through. And so I was extremely fortunate to have that opportunity. But after 2 years, the Phillies had seen enough. They threw a coat and tie in my direction and said, "You've got a much better future behind a desk than you do behind the plate." And that's my front office career began at the age of 23.
So when they told you that you have a better career behind a desk, initially, how did that make you feel? Did it kind of motivated you, challenge you, or disappointed you? Did you feel bitter? I mean, what was your overall intake after you was told that you have a better career behind a desk?
Well, I think I knew from the get-go that I wanted a career in the front office end of baseball. I kind of knew it with time. I'd had those 2 years. It was a wonderful experience. I knew I wasn't going to be a major league ball player, but I'd gotten this opportunity that was unique. And so when the Phillies said that to me, I think in many ways I was relieved. I felt very blessed that I could now move on into the front office end of baseball, which I always had anticipated. And so I got my crack as a ball player, and now it was time to move in and see if I could make it as an executive in professional baseball.
Now, Pat, which team did you get your position as a starting towards an executive level in the Major League Baseball front office, as they say?
Or I went back to Miami to learn the ropes in the front office. The general manager of the Miami club was a man named Bill Durney, who had a huge effect on me. He was a veteran baseball guy, and I picked his brain. I watched him. I studied him. I learned, and I felt when the '64 season ended that I could do this, and I wanted to do this. I wanted my own opportunity, and that came the next year, 1965. The Phillies had an opening with their farm club in Spartanburg, South Carolina. The GM post was open. The Phillies presented it to me, and I thought it through and took it and moved to Spartanburg in February of 1965. I was 24 years old, filled with great dreams and great ambitions, and that's where I spent the next 4 years of my career. As the GM of the Spartanburg Phillies, and that was a very special time in my life. I was fortunate to work under a godly man with great wisdom. His name was R.E. Littlejohn. He was the owner of the team, and he all but adopted me. I became the son that he never had. I felt that. And he poured, his life lessons, his approach, his wisdom into me. And he gave me free reign to run the club. And those 4 years were just hard to put into words exactly what they meant to me. And at the end, and I was hoping, I wanted to go to higher in baseball and go up the ladder. Mr. Littlejohn kept stressing to me, you can go to the big leagues from Spartanburg. Well, that was unheard of, from the lowest level of baseball to the big leagues. But he kept saying that. And sure enough, in July of 1968, it happened, but not in baseball. I got a call from Dr. Jack Ramsey, who was the general manager of the 76ers and about to become the coach as well. And he said, I need somebody to run my front office. I'd like to talk to you. Well, I had never met Jack Ramsey. He didn't know me, but he called me in Spartanburg, cold turkey, invited me to come to Philadelphia to meet with him, and I did. And after a couple of trips and interviews, they hired me. I was 28 years old, and I left Spartanburg, left the Phillies organization, and that launched this long 51-year career in the NBA.
Well, Pat, obviously, it seems like to me from the outside that baseball gave you your start, but professional basketball league probably was the turning point at taking your expertise, your experience, your knowledge, and really moving it to the next level that people recognize you as. And I don't want to jump right instantly into the Philadelphia 76ers. So how was it like working for the Chicago Bulls you had mentioned?
Well, that happened. I spent 1 year in Philadelphia, the 68-69 season. My title was business manager, but basically, I was running the club day to day because Jack Ramsey was off coaching, and that's where he was engrossed. And so I got this opportunity as a young guy to deal with all the issues of the front office. And our big challenge was trying to put people in the building, the Spectrum. Wilt Chamberlain had been traded that summer, and the Sixers were not quite the same attraction, but I got my feet wet promoting and entertaining the fans, and it was wonderful. It was a great learning experience. And at the end of that one season, the Chicago Bulls came knocking. They had an opening. Their GM post was open, and they wanted to talk to me, interview me about taking that job, and I did. I flew out to Chicago, met with the ownership group, and they offered me the job. And so after 1 year in Philly, as Jack Ramsey's fill-in, I had the opportunity to go to Chicago as the general manager. At that point, I was 29 years old and heading to the Windy City, and fell in love immediately with the city of Chicago. We had a big job to do. The Bulls had never really caught on in Chicago. They were struggling for identity. On the first day on the job, I made a trade that brought Chet Walker to Chicago from Philadelphia, and that was a turning point for us. Bob Love emerged as the other all-star forward. Jerry Sloan was the anchor of the club. We had a center in Tom Borwinkle, and little by little, we began to gain traction in Chicago. The fans began to come to the Chicago Stadium in bigger numbers. They truly enjoyed that team. Dick Motta was the coach, and we got into the playoffs each year. And 2 years back to back, we got knocked out by the Lakers, which was tough. The Bulls were beginning to get a toehold in the city of Chicago. It was tough because the Cubs and the White Sox were there, and the Bears were huge, and the Blackhawks hockey team was big. And little by little, we began to gain some ground in Chicago. So I was there for 4 years. The club was sold in the summer of 1972. And at the end of that 72-73 season, I knew it was time to leave. It was a new ownership group. And that's when the Atlanta Hawks came along and made an offer, and I accepted it and moved to Atlanta. So that gets me from Chicago to Atlanta.
And I believe your role in Atlanta, you had something to do with Pistol Pete Maravich coming to the Atlanta Hawks, or was he already there when you got
No,
that job?
he was there. Cotton Fitzsimmons was the coach. Lou Hudson was on that team. Walter Bellamy and so forth. But we did not have a very good year. We had anticipated a good year. It didn't happen. And at the end of the season, our coach Cotton Fitzsimmons came to me and said, he said, Pete Maravich is not really getting it done here for us. See what you can get for it. And so I put my trader's hat on and shopped around and found that New Orleans was coming in as an expansion team in 1974. And Pete, of course, had roots there. He had played at LSU. He was a great hero in the state of Louisiana. And the new team in New Orleans wanted him and wanted him badly. They didn't have any players, but they had draft picks and they had future expansion players. And I kept negotiating, and we ended up with this quite an attractive package, and a good enough package that we made the deal. And that's how Pete ended up in New Orleans. And at the end of that saga, I heard back from the 76ers. Their GM post had been open, and they reached out to me, and I had an opportunity to go back home. And so after one season in Atlanta, the season that culminated with the trade of Pete Maravich, I was headed back to Philadelphia. In July of 1974, uh, here I am, back home. I was at that point. I was 34 years old. I'd had a whole bunch of experience. That 1 year in Philly, then 4 in Chicago, a year in Atlanta, and I felt I was much more mature, much more accomplished. And back I go to Philadelphia, and that led to 12 years as the GM of the 76ers. Under 3 different ownerships, many personnel moves, the acquisition of Julius Erving, the drafting of Darryl Dawkins, and later the acquisition of Moses Malone, the drafting of Charles Barkley, Harris Cheeks, Andrew Toney, trade for Bobby Jones. It was quite a time in my life. And then the highlight, of course, was the 1983 season when we won the NBA title, swept the Lakers in 4. And that's the last championship the 76ers have had over 40 years ago.
I definitely recall that. And I mentioned as a Lakers fan, oh boy, it was tough to go up against the Sixers in that year of '83, being swept 4-0. But let's go back a little bit. The Julius Erving, Dr. J trade, how did that all come about? Did you have any particular role in putting that type of trade together in 1976, I believe?
Well, it was that summer of 1976 is when the merger took place. The ABA was going out of business, but 4 of their franchises wanted to join the NBA, and they did, including the Nets of the ABA. And Julius was playing for the Nets. He was in a contract dispute with his owner, and he refused to report to training camp in the fall of '76. And I stayed in touch with the Nets, their GM. I kept talking to them about, would you ever move him? And one day he called me and said, yeah, we'll move him. Our owner needs money. I said, how much? He said, $3 million. Now, this is 1976 dollars. 3 million was like 3 trillion. I said, well, what about signing? He said, well, that's going to probably take another 3 million, a 5-year deal. And I said, do well in math in school, but I think that's 6 million. He said, yeah, that's what. We had a new owner, and I remember going out to see Mr. Dixon and explaining to him what was going on, and told him that Julius Erving was available. He said, well, what will it take to get him? I said, a total of 6 million. Tell me, Pat, he said, are you recommending this deal? I said, yes, sir, I am. And he said, well, then go get it done. And that's what happened immediately. Not only immediately, we were able to make a deal with the Nets. We were able to sign Julius, and that's how he became a 76ers. And that's where he spent the rest of his career. We had a great run with him. And then finally, after Moses Malone joined us, we were able to win that title in 1980.
And actually, that $6 million, isn't that the reason why they gave him the number 6 on his jersey?
No, not really. He was a great admirer of Bill Russell. He had worn 32 in the other league, but that number had been retired. That was Billy Cunningham's number in Philly, and it had been retired. And Julius was a great Bill Russell admirer and said, yeah, I'll take Bill Russell's number. And that's how that came about. But he became known as the $6 million man. Well, today, The 12th or the 15th man on the bench makes that. But back in that day,
Yeah.
that was an enormous sum of money. But Julius was worth every penny of it.
Uh,
You know, he spent the rest of his career there from 1976 to 1987, and retired in Philadelphia, and left an enormous mark on the game of basketball.
Well, that time span when Julius Erving was traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, the Sixers, I believe, was the winningest team, I believe, for the 6 straight years up until about 82, 83. They had the best record in the regular season. Billy Cunningham had a very high winning percentage as a coach, but they weren't able to get over the hump every time it got to the NBA Finals. Did you feel somewhat of the pressure as a general manager the same way that the players felt the pressure and the coach felt the pressure, or was your pressure a little bit different that you weren't able to win the championship at that particular span?
Well, the minute we acquired Julius, then the expectation was if you don't win a title at the end of each season, you've had a bad year. And that was the attitude that once we got Julius, we were expected to win an NBA championship every year. But we just didn't have quite enough. And that's why in the summer of 1982, when Moses Malone came available as a free agent, the Sixers pounced, sold him on coming to Philadelphia. He bought in. Julius was thrilled to have him. And in the fall of '82, when that season started, we knew now we had the ultimate weapon. Bobby Jones and Julius Erving at the forwards, Andrew Toney, Maurice Cheeks, the guard line. And now we had an all-star center in the person of Moses. He was motivated at a very high level, to win a championship, and he had a magnificent season in Philadelphia, won the MVP, and led us to an NBA title, one that is still remembered vividly in the Philadelphia area. Last title that the Sixers had. And 283, that's a season that will always be remembered.
Right. And obviously, you deserve a lot of credit putting that whole deal together with, having Moses Malone being picked up as a free agent. Was there a particular Executive of the Year award, and did you actually win it that year, I believe?
I did not. Um, I think once we had all that talent, I think they felt that Williams was just there pushing buttons, But there's a history behind every one of those players. We drafted Maurice Cheeks on the second round. Andrew Toney, we drafted on the first round with a draft pick we had gotten from Indiana. Uh, Bobby Jones was a trade with Denver. Julius was a financial acquisition, and then the deal that brought Moses as a free agent. There was a story. Then our bench, Clint Richardson was a draft pick, and we put that whole team together little by little. It finally became a championship quality team, and we just went back last year to Philadelphia to celebrate the 40th anniversary of that championship. 40th anniversary. Boy,
Right,
where
right. I mean,
where where have all the years gone?
yeah, I remember that 40 years, believe it or not, like it was yesterday. Now you would only stay with the Sixers about 2 more seasons, or two, I guess three to four. I'll let you clarify it because you had the last big move during that time span between 82 and 86 was when Charles Barkley was drafted for the 76ers. And many people thought that that team would have been a dynasty after the 83 NBA Finals. But it seemed like to me, some things kind of went in the other direction. And the team was still a good team, but they were not able to really go past the the Boston Celtics or the Milwaukee Bucks, and they really didn't reach that pinnacle that they did in '83. Any speculations on why that team didn't really get back to the finals and win it again?
Well, the '83 team, everybody had a perfect season. There were no injuries. Age-wise and experience-wise, everybody was at their peak. And it was just a special time and circumstances. Plus, everybody had a motivational factor. You know, we'd come up short, and now Moses was here, and there was just a sense, but this is our year. We're going to do it, and we did. And we were never quite able to get back to that same level.
Mhm.
Uh, the players were all a year older, coming closer to retirement. Never were quite the same. We had reached our peak and our goal, and it's sometimes hard to come back, and do it again. And we were not able to. We got close. We're in the playoffs every year, and we were extremely competitive, but we were never able to get back to that same level. Um, Not sure what we could have done differently, but Billy Cunningham was our coach, and when you look at Billy's winning percentage, he's among the top coaches in the history of basketball. He only coached 8 years, but in those 8 years, he had a unique time. He became a coaching legend in addition to being a great player. Billy Cunningham was a hero in Philadelphia and still is.
Well, it's kind of like some mystery puzzles towards, I know the '85, '86 year was going to be the last year that you would be with the 76ers. And Julius Erving obviously was getting a little bit older, so his level really wasn't the same. Charles Barkley was a rookie sensation, so he was someone that you could build around. But all of a sudden, Moses Malone becomes dissatisfied with the 76ers, and he wanted to leave. Billy Cunningham, I don't know if he was fired or he just quit. He left, I believe, after the '84, '85 year. And I think going into the '85, '86 draft, the Sixers made some trades that was kind of confusion to some people. I don't know if you had the number 2 draft pick in the '85, '86 draft, was it? If I'm correct?
We'd won the lottery, so we had the first pick in the draft.
Right.
Uh, Unfortunately, it was a very strange draft. Well, many of those top players ended up with severe drug problems, and there was no great player in our mind to turn a franchise. And so we dealt the pick to Cleveland for a young forward named Roy Hinson. They threw in $800,000. And we felt that was a good trade. Moses, as you mentioned, his time had come in Philadelphia, and we dealt him to Washington. And none of the trades did work out, as it turns out. They didn't click. But I handled that draft for the Sixers. And then the day after the draft, I departed and headed to Orlando. A group of business leaders invited me to head up the effort to try and bring an NBA expansion team to Orlando, and it felt like the ultimate challenge for me. And I took it and left the Sixers that's June of '86, and headed right to Orlando with the idea of what can we do to try and rally this community and see if we can get an expansion team.
As we was leaving off, you had mentioned that you had made the transition to become the co-founder towards putting the Orlando Magic professional basketball team together. Did you kind of have that deal already in place before you left the 76ers, or you left the 76ers and then pursued the deal with the Orlando Magic?
Oh, there we listen. They had invited me to come down and head up the effort, but there were no guarantees. We got a sense that the NBA wanted to expand, but it certainly was not final. It was not official. And the other thing was there were other cities clamoring to get an expansion team: Miami, Charlotte, Minneapolis, and now Orlando joins the effort. And so there are four of us vying, to get, who knows? I mean, one expansion team, would they do two? And then shockingly, they took all four of us in April of '87. And boy, that was a big deal. We had come down here in June of '86. 10 months later, it had been successful, and the NBA granted four new teams, expansion teams. Orlando was one of them, and little Orlando. At that time, not the big, massive, growing city it is today, but we convinced the NBA that Orlando would be a successful city, and it was. From the get-go, there was enormous enthusiasm here. We hired Matt Gukas as our coach, and together what we thought was a pretty good expansion team. And then we had to make our draft picks. Nick Anderson, then Dennis Scott came along. And the next thing you know, we won that draft lottery the year that Shaquille O'Neal was coming out. And then the next year in '93, we won it again. And that's how Penny Hardaway ended up in Orlando. So, where there were some exciting things happening right from the get-go.
So obviously at this stage, it's a different type of feeling now that you have with the Orlando Magic because you already kind of got the experience of winning a NBA championship in the front office level with the Philadelphia 76ers. So you know the feeling of what it's like to take a team from point A to point B towards the NBA final. This situation here is a little bit different because you have an expansion team, and expansion teams usually start off at the bottom, and you kind of got to struggle the first couple of years before you kind of get towards a adequate level. So, did you have a feeling like this was going to be like another chapter in your level of putting this team together and moving it towards the NBA final, or did you feel any pressure towards putting the players together and this whole organization together?
Well, we preached patience from the beginning. We told the community that this was not going to happen overnight, and that we had to rely on the draft, and we had to put together one piece at a time. And that's what we did. And Nick Anderson, we got our two guard. The next year, Dennis Scott became our small forward, our three man. Then the next year, we drafted a young guy named Brian Williams, who did not work out with us, but he was meant to be our power forward. And then in '92, we got our center, and that's where Shaq came along. And the next year, we got our point guard in Penny Hardaway. Finally got our big forward in free agency with Horace Grant. And that's how we put this team together that got to the NBA Finals in 1995. It happened quickly.
Right.
And then the heartbreak of the summer of '96 when Shaq left as a free agent. And then over the next two seasons, Penny Hardaway's both knees went. And he was never the same. And this great young team that we had was, it fell apart right in front of our eyes. What we thought was going to be a 10 or 12-year era of dominance didn't happen. But we still have pleasant memories of those early years, the early to mid '90s. That was a great time here in Orlando.
Well, Pat, did you have the same type of feeling when Shaquille O'Neal left towards free agency that you had when Moses Malone left, that this is a big loss? And at this point, I believe Shaquille O'Neal is really a younger player, kind of reaching his prime. So it might have been a little bit different feeling than losing Moses Malone. But at the same time, is it drawing back some type of bad memories now that, here we go again, losing a top player and having other pieces of the puzzle not really coming together after getting to the NBA Finals?
Well, there was a difference because we traded Moses. That was a deal that we made with Washington. In the case of Jack, he was a free agent and had the right to negotiate or pursue other options. And the Lakers were very aggressive, and they had a wonderful package to sell. And they sold Moses that he had. I mean, told Shaq that he had a better future with the Lakers than in Orlando. And And Shaq moved. He took the offer and he was gone. We didn't have anything to show for it. But yeah, that was a devastating loss. But and then, as I mentioned, Penny's knees were not the same. He was never the same because of those knee injuries, and our dream never did materialize. And so we went through a long dry spell. But then the ping pong balls in that lottery paid off because down the road in the 2000s, another young center came along after we had won the lottery, and that's how Dwight Howard ended up here, and had a marvelous run in Orlando, including another trip to the finals. This time against the Lakers, they beat us, but got to the finals again. So there've been some highlights here in Orlando. We never quite got over the final hump to win it all, but we came close on a couple of them.
Yeah, and Pat, as you mentioned, you had spent many years now down in Orlando and involvement in the role in the front office with the Orlando Magic. And I believe the Orlando Magic is the only professional sports team technically that's in the city of Orlando. I know you're close to Tampa, but still directly in Orlando, that's the only professional sports team I believe that you have. So your involvement over those long periods of times with the Orlando Magic, do you look back at that the same way as you did with the 76ers? Or is it a different type of feeling seeing that you were actually the co-founder of kind of putting this team together?
Oh, I've got nothing but wonderful memories of my time here. We had some great successes. We had some periods of dry periods, but our fan base has been extraordinarily loyal. It's a great sports city. And that's why 4.5 years ago, I announced my retirement from Magic because, as you mentioned, we have been the only Major League Sports franchise here. We do have the Major League Soccer now, but I left 4 years ago to head up an effort to try and bring a Major League Baseball team to Orlando. Baseball is going to expand at some point. They made it clear that they would like to add two more franchises, and so we're in the hunt. We need to show Major League Baseball that a franchise in Orlando would give the whole sport a huge lift, and so that's what I've been engrossed in for the last 4.5 years, and we're convinced that Major League Baseball and Orlando would be a wonderful combination. So we're working hard on that even as we speak.
So actually, although you had retired from the Orlando Magic, you're still not totally retired because you're saying now you're actively pursuing a professional baseball team. And are you kind of utilizing the same experience that you had trying to put together the Orlando Magic expansion basketball team the same way that you're pursuing an expansion professional Major League Baseball team?
Well, in many ways, yes. We learned so much from that effort to bring the NBA here in that period from 86 to 87, learned so much. And so many of those same principles are effective, and we've worked them. We're the largest media market in North America that doesn't have a Major League Baseball team and growing. There are about 1,000 people a day moving to Central Florida. The growth here is just off the charts. It's phenomenal, and we continue to grow. We're going to catch Denver pretty soon as a media market, and then Detroit. We're going to go past Minneapolis at some point. So we think we're ready to be a great Major League Baseball city. And so as expansion heats up, we know it's going to be very competitive. There are other cities that want to get into big league baseball. But we think Orlando has a lot to offer to Major League Baseball. And so I'm heading up that effort again, just as I did 37 years ago. And we'll see how it plays out. But it's going to be coming to a head, and yet the whole thing's going to speed up a lot when we get to 2020.
Right. So again, Orlando is a city that's kind of like on a destination, possibly for a Major League Baseball expansion team. Is there any other projects or anything else personally, or that you wouldn't mind disclosing that you're working on, towards your movement, whatever it is, whatever it particularly is regarding your life beyond just this now expansion of a Major League Baseball team?
I continue to write. I've written over 130 books over the years, and I've got a few more in the pipeline. So I continue to write. And my hobby, people ask me, what do you do in your spare time? I read. They said,
Uh,
what's your hobby? I said, I read. That's what I do. Do you ever take a vacation? Well, not much, but reading to me is a vacation. And so I'm a book collector. We opened up the Pat Williams Leadership Library here a year and a half ago. And so that's always an interesting spot for people to visit when they come to town. And that library continues to grow. We have 21 grandkids, so I'm fully engrossed in their life. A number of them are young athletes, so it seems we're constantly at somebody's game, nonstop actually. And so life is absolutely packed. So it's jam packed for me. So um, I've got to live to 120 to see all this. So I want to see my grandkids grow up. I want to see what they do with their lives. And so um, George Burns was once asked, he said, how do you live to be 100? He said, well, the first thing you got to do is get to be 99. And he said, and then for the next year, be very careful. So, I want to break that 100 mark. So uh, there's too much going on in life at this point. Then when the Lord takes me to heaven, I'll be satisfied that I did my very best.
But overall, I mean, do you feel like well, you mentioned some things that you want to leave maybe towards a legacy with your grandchildren, but it seemed like to me you have accomplished so much in the professional sports world. Do you feel like it's anything else that you need to expand, to establish yourself towards, even though you're still pursuing an expansion team with with the city of Orlando? Is there anything left for you that's driving you towards this passion in our business?
Well, that effort to bring Major League Baseball here drives me every day. This is the biggest challenge I've ever faced, and anything that's happened in my sports career. We're wrapped up in it every day. How do we get this ballpark? How do we find the right owner? How do we convince baseball that it would be the spot? There are other cities competing. Nashville, for example. We hear about Raleigh, Durham. That Salt Lake City wants to get a team. Utah. There are all sorts of things going on out there, and we know it's going to be extremely competitive. So I think this is probably the biggest project I've ever done into.
Exactly, exactly. And again, you love the Orlando area, obviously spending this amount of time down in Orlando. Certainly, you must feel like a very blessed person to have your life pretty much come in order the way it has. And I don't know how much time we have left, but obviously, if there's anything else that you kind of would like to let people know about yourself, feel free to do so.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I've enjoyed visiting with you. The centerpiece of my life is my Christian faith. I came to know Jesus as my Lord and Savior back when I was 27 years old in Spartanburg, and and God has been directing me through all of this. As I look back over my life and these different steps and places that we've been talking about, in every case, God opened the door and for me to walk in. It didn't just happen. I can see now that He had a plan and purpose for my life. And so that's been the exciting part of my life, the interesting part of my life. And now we're going to see in this baseball effort, whether another door opens. We're doing everything we can to get prepared, but that door's going to have to open, and we'll see how that plays out. So there's no downtime, and that's how I'm wired. I'm wired to be involved and stay active and busy and have goals in front of you all the time that you're striving for. I think that's important. Always reaching out and trying to get to that next rung on the ladder. So I'm I guess motivated is the word, John says. So stay tuned. Keep your eye on this whole baseball thing. We'll see how it plays out.
Definitely, Pat. And I mean, really, regardless, however this thing turns out, I mean, knowing you the way I know you with your background, I think the Orlando area stands a real strong chance because I'm not sure if people have felt that Orlando was going to get an NBA basketball team. I can't quite remember what the mentality was at that time. But certainly, your track record of putting together an expansion professional basketball team means that the people in Orlando is definitely in good hands. And it was a pleasure, again, meeting you and interviewing you this morning. And I definitely wish you the best of luck with the expansion of the Orlando baseball team and just anything else that you and your family is going through. And look forward to possibly interviewing you sometime maybe 2025 if anything new breaks with the Orlando baseball team. Excuse me, the year of 2024. I'm saying 2025. That's the next year. And everything.
Jonathan, thanks very much. Nice to get to meet you, and I appreciate our time together. Thank you.
Okay, it's our pleasure.